Oh, welcome in to the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And man, still waiting for old cousin Shane to get him some internet so he can join us on the show. Again, that's scheduled to be later this week, although we've heard that one before. But even with no cousin Shane on the show, we have got a fun one here to get the week started. We've been promising these SEC West fan votes, how that's going to go. We did the East last week. Go back and check that out if you missed it. I just got off the phone with my buddy Dave Bartoo. We chatted for nearly half an hour, and man, I was at the end. It was a great conversation. He got me a little depressed. I'll get to that in a second. But as soon as we got done, I was like, my God, we should have recorded this bad boy. So he is scheduled to be on the next show as long as we can line up the schedules and all that. So we're going to get into a deep dive on the SEC schedule with Dave Bartoo, hopefully on the next episode. But let's just start with the conclusion of spring meetings there. And I teased it on Friday. I said there'd be a bonus emergency podcast if anything happened. So obviously nothing happened. The SEC came out and decided not to hold a vote on the 8 or 9 game conference schedule. There was enough momentum to stay at 8. And yeah, obviously, if you listen to this show or you follow me on Twitter, you know, not a fan of that decision. But that's something that Dave Bartoo, I don't want to say he's totally convinced me, but he's a strong proponent of the 8-game conference schedule and what that'll mean for the SEC. He's got some very interesting ideas. He wants to boost the non-conference, have non-conference games dictate playoff spots aside from, of course, conference championships. And so that would have more big key marquee non-conference games for everyone in the SEC. It was an interesting conversation. Again, I'm going to try to rehash all these talking points with Dave Bartoo, but when it comes to players adding another conference game, players getting beat up, teams having poor records from playing 9 games in the SEC, a lot of good points made by Dave Bartoo. So we'll rehash all that on the next episode. But the SEC did finalize a format for the basketball, soccer, men's tennis, women's tennis, and softball. So basically nothing that we'd care to talk about on this show, but that's what they got out of Destin. But one final thing before we put a pin on what happened down in Destin. A little comment here from Mike Leach. Didn't have a single quote from him somehow during the league meetings down there in Destin. And Coach Leach made an appearance on Sirius XM. They put this out after Mike Leach had already left, and I just thought this was too hilarious not to share. So here's Mike Leach on why he was only invited to the spring meetings for just 2 days.
Pac-12 was more of a shorts flip-flop setting. Here you tried to look coachish.
What looking coaches?
I got my khakis. You see, which this is the ultimate coach uniform. Khakis
for sure.
Okay, can't go wrong with khakis. Just wear khakis. Okay, and then tennis shoes. Because the dress shoe guys, they're just a little hoity-toity for me. Tennis shoes. Now, if they keep you for 3 days, no, all bets are off. Then it's shorts, T-shirt, flip-flops.
By the third day, that's what you're going with?
By the third day, but I think that's part of why they're letting me go after too. Okay, then of course got the Mississippi State, got the top, and part of it you need so you don't die of exposure in there because it's cold. That AC is full tilt. Okay, and so so I got to remember, got to have some. I got to layer up.
All right, so there you got it from Coach Leach. Again, I just thought that was too funny not to share with his coaching attire, that you just never know where the old Pirate's going to go on one of these tangents he goes on. But going back to my conversation with Dave Bartoo right before I hopped on the line, if you follow him, again, give him a follow. He's a tremendous follow on social media at CFB Matrix. And he has been putting out here schedules. He's trying to make it balanced in the SEC. And the way he explained it to me, you got to put teams that are at the top of the league when it comes to recruiting, your Alabamas, Georgias, Texas, and LSU, I believe was his other. You got to keep them in unique pods. Otherwise, it just gets too unbalanced with the schedules. Yeah, so these are the 4 that Dave Bartoo, I'll throw it up on the screen. He's got his 1 seeds, Alabama, LSU, Texas, and Georgia. Just based on recent college football history, those are the 4 that are the strongest recruiters. You go down just a peg below that, your 2 seeds, Auburn, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Florida. 3 seeds, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Arkansas, South Carolina. And then finally the 4 seeds, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Missouri, and Kentucky. Now I realize, we're not going to the pod system, but Bartoo thinks this is basically what you got to go to if you're going to go to this format. You got to keep it as balanced as possible out of the pure fairness of the SEC. Now, I went a little bit deeper here and kind of marked the teams, and I'm already getting blowback on some of these matchups. But, of course, in your pods, you got to keep Alabama and Auburn. That's a dead giveaway. But I would keep Alabama and Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi State, which I know Hail State fans, not a fan of that matchup. I get it, but you've been playing for over 100 years together, the 2 closest campuses in the SEC. I think Alabama and Mississippi State, if we go to a 9-team schedule with the 3 permanent rivals, I think, hell, nobody wants to get matched up with Alabama, but I think that's where it's going to be. For Arkansas, I gave you Texas, which I know Razorback fans are going to like. Ole Miss, I think that's a fair matchup, and that's always a hell of a game. And Missouri, and I know right out the gate, Razorback fans, you don't give a damn about Missouri, but that's been a tremendous series. It's easy to get to the travel is not that big of a factor. And again, we're trying to create balance here with the 3 permanent rivals. I mean, hell, Alabama, Texas A&M, those would be hell of a games there, but 9 times out of 10, all those other teams are going to recruit better than you. So do you really want to get paired up with just the elite of the elite, or do you want to get paired up with teams that you actually match up well historically in recent SEC history? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. For Auburn, of course, we got Alabama, no-brainer, Georgia, and just to go basically easy on Auburn, and proximity's close there, Vanderbilt. I've seen Auburn paired with Florida in place of Vanderbilt, but I just don't think you can give Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. I know Florida's been down here, but if they get that thing rolling, good God, Auburn is just, they're never going to be able to compete with the 3-headed juggernaut there. Now, this one I think Florida fans would get on board with. Florida facing Georgia annually, South Carolina annually, and Kentucky. And that's been a nice little series there in recent years. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense for the geography of Kentucky versus Florida, but that's been a good game for damn near half a decade here between these two. So it makes some sense there. South Carolina, the proximity is there. And again, with Georgia, I think Florida fans, I think they'd be pretty damn happy with that one. Georgia, of course, you got Florida, Auburn, and South Carolina. So all of a sudden, South Carolina, you may be saying, well, what the hell? Our 3 permanent rivals is looking pretty tough. And that it is for sure. Kentucky playing Tennessee, I think that makes a lot of sense. Missouri for the Wildcats. And then I already mentioned it, Florida. I know Kentucky obviously doesn't want to go to the 9 game. It's been well documented, but this 3 teams, this is about as good as it's going to get. I think maybe you could throw in Vandy in there somehow, but I think a lot of Kentucky fans would get on board with this 3 if that's what it is. LSU, Texas A&M and LSU fans dying to keep that game together. Let's give it to them. LSU, Ole Miss, nice little rivalry there. And then Mississippi State. Again, I think this is a 3-teamer I think LSU fans could get on board with. Ole Miss, keeping Mississippi State, of course. LSU, that rivalry. And again, I mentioned it, Arkansas. I think Ole Miss will be fine with this one. Mississippi State, now here, Probably not too happy with this one. I'm already seeing some feedback here, but of course you're keeping the Ole Miss Egg Bowl, LSU and Alabama. That is a damn gauntlet for Mississippi State, but I mean it's going to be a gauntlet regardless here, unless somehow you get you find a way to give them Auburn or Vanderbilt or something like that. But Mississippi State, I don't think I'm going to get any Hail State followers from for that 3-team permanent division rival. Missouri, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and again, Arkansas. I think Missouri fans will be pretty happy with that. 3 teams that you have some history with and have shown that you can compete with in the SEC. Oklahoma, Texas, of course. Already mentioned Missouri. And I know this pisses off the 12th man, but Texas A&M makes a lot of sense there. Oklahoma, Texas A&M. Those are the 3 I like for the Sooners. South Carolina, we covered it. Georgia and Florida. That's tough, so we're throwing you a bone. You get Vanderbilt as your 3rd. Again, I don't think a lot of Gamecock fans would, maybe look at this and say that's too damn tough, but a lot of good games between South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida over the years, so there's some history there, and again, you're getting the bone there of getting Vanderbilt, as is Tennessee, who has to play Alabama and Kentucky in my model. I think that's a 3-teamer that most Tennessee fans would be happy to sign up for. Texas, again, you're getting Oklahoma, got to keep that Red River game alive. Texas A&M and Arkansas, that's a hell of a trio for the Texas Longhorns. No layups there. A&M, we've covered it. Texas, LSU, and Oklahoma. And then last but not least, Vanderbilt. Keep the in-state with Tennessee, getting South Carolina, and you get Auburn. If I'm a Vanderbilt fan, I think I'm even happy with that. So, that's one that Clark Lee and company, as you continue to rebuild your program, could potentially compete with those 3 programs. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section there. But again, we're trying to make this one not necessarily, the dream 3 where you can beat them every year, but we're trying to keep this competitive and match you up with certain recruiters that you're on the same level with, if possible, with proximity, with history. There's a lot of ways to go here with the 9-game conference schedule, which hopefully will get passed in the years to come. But once we have Dave Bartoo on the line, we might have more people in favor of the 8-game model, which it doesn't seem like we got many. So that's another reason I want to have Bartoo on the line to kind of give the other side of the argument. He made some good points, and again, he's not convinced me, but he's given me a lot to consider. And I think he's in the ear of a couple SEC programs, and that's why we didn't have the vote go down here in Destin last week. Now, I feel like I've been teasing this for a month now, even though it's really been a week, but let's get to the SEC West fan predictions after we put out these schedule graphics about a week and a half ago. Really appreciate all the response. Didn't really know if we were getting any response, so this was not really a planned content that I was going to discuss on the podcast, but we just had so many overwhelming reactions to all these schedules that I rounded up, went and collected each and every response that gave a record prediction for the upcoming season for all 14 SEC programs. And let's start with Alabama, which I was not blown away by the final results, as you'd expect. 12-0, undefeated, regular season for the Crimson Tide, was the favorite of the fans that participated in this poll. But one thing that did surprise me, a lot of people 11-1 for Alabama. Far more people are picking Georgia to go undefeated. If you missed it last week, we talked about Georgia. 5 times as many people nearly picked Georgia to go undefeated than picked them to go 11-1, whereas Alabama, not even close. Nearly everyone voted Alabama to go 12-0 or 11-1, but it was only by about 10 votes that 12-0 won out. So that was very surprising to me, considering Alabama's probably going to open the season number 1 in the polls. They're going to be picked to win the West. They're going to be picked to win the SEC come media day. So I was kind of assuming that the same thing for Georgia. I thought Alabama would be just an incredibly, incredibly huge favorite to go undefeated. maybe we got some wise listeners on this show that, I'm trying to pump the brakes a little bit on calling this an all-time Alabama team. I know they got the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. They got the nation's best defender. It's easy to just fall in love with this roster when you see that, but there's a whole lot more to a football team and 2 players. So Alabama, they deserve to be the favorites, no doubt. Not suggesting anything other than that, but it is interesting that so many people think Alabama could drop a football game because, hell, I know they lost 2 last year, but it's not often they lose a football game. So it's one of those where you have to see it to believe it. Yet we got more and more people believing that the Crimson Tide will drop a game in the regular season. Now, Arkansas Razorbacks next on the docket here. This was an interesting one. And fan expectation through the roof there in Fayetteville. I like to think I'm a little bit a part of pumping up the Razorbacks, and people are certainly out there listening. Tons and tons of Razorbacks responded to this poll. And by one vote, just a single vote, 9-3 regular season record for the Arkansas Razorbacks was the winner. But again, by only one vote, 10-2 was the next most popular for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So like I'm saying here, the vast majority of people, 9-10 win season for Arkansas. Again, you got to go back to last year. I think they were picked dead last in the West, had not been favored in a conference game in 3-4 years, and yet here we go, 9-10 win season is the expectation for the vast majority of Arkansas fans out there. That is just wild, and I'm not pumping the brakes on this one. I mean, I think it's justified, but it's pretty wild to see just the turn of events. 8-4 and 11-1 were the next 2 most popular. More people think the Arkansas Razorbacks will go 11-1 than 7-5, which is just incredible considering where that program was when Sam Pittman got there. And how about this? Nearly as many people think Arkansas will go 12-0 as 7-5. So we're talking basically the same amount of people drinking the Kool-Aid as think Arkansas is going to come back down to earth. If I'm a Razorback fan, I'm pretty fired up, and clearly, based on these responses, the Razorbacks are feeling like they got a shot. They're done talking about how difficult the schedule looks like. They love their team with all their coaches and standout players returning. Arkansas Razorbacks, 9-3, again, was the most popular prediction for the Razorbacks. Now, a different story on the Plains. Now, I do want to say this because I don't want to sit here and trash Auburn the whole time, but they did just land a transfer. Former LSU receiver Corey Moore, 27 catches, 248 yards in 2 seasons at LSU. Former 4-star receiver, I believe. He only had 5 catches last season, but a very talented player. Not someone I think LSU is really going to miss, but that's not the point. The point is Auburn desperate for some help at the receiver position. They're going to be getting it via Corey Moore. So I just wanted to make that little announcement. That happened over the weekend. But I wanted to start with the good news, because the bad news, most popular pick for them Auburn Tigers, 6-6, which that should never be the mark there in Auburn, but that, again, is what the fans are saying. And second most popular, I hate to say it, 5-7, followed by 4-8. So just no expectations for the Auburn Tigers. We only had one person predict Auburn to go 9-3. We had 0 that predicted anything better than 9-3. And again, when one single person. More people picked Auburn to go 3-9 than 9-3, which is just, it's sad, it's depressing, but hell, as we always like to say this offseason, with everyone piling on Auburn, expecting Brian Harsin to get fired by the second month of the season, when you doubt Auburn, that's when they come and punch you right in the damn mouth and have a fantastic season. So maybe all this negativity outside of the Plains is going to rally this fan base, this team. Hell, let's not forget, heading into November, Auburn Tigers controlled their destiny in the SEC West. If that team shows up, they could be the surprise of the nation. They're going to have to prove it early, hosting Penn State, nationally televised football game, but I can't wait for it, and maybe that'll be their coming out party there for the nation when they trounce Penn State on the Plains. Now, how about the LSU Tigers? Interesting here, kind of more in the line of what I've been thinking for Brian Kelly's first year. Not to say they don't have talent. They got a world of talent down there. They've got an elite head coach, proven track record, championship caliber coach. But I think it's going to be a tough climb, and that is what most fans think. 7-5 was the most predicted record for them LSU Tigers this fall in Brian Kelly's first season. But the second most, by 10 votes, was 8-4, followed by 9-3. So, it's not doom and gloom or anything here. People are certainly seeing possibilities where LSU pulls an upset or two this season. And again, they got the talent, they got the coaching staff. But I think everyone is pumping the brakes until they see this team on the field with so much transition and playing in the West. You're getting Florida and Tennessee out of the East this year. That's better than Georgia. But aside from that, those are two of the worst teams. Potentially, you're getting Florida in the swamp. You get Tennessee in Death Valley. At least you got that going for you. But this may be the best Tennessee team in several years. So may not be in LSU's. It may not be in the cards for LSU to have a great season year one again. So no surprise from me that 7-5 was the most predicted record for the LSU Tigers. But I think LSU fans, while the expectations are still high within that fan base, 8-4, 9-3, I think that's their expectations. I think they could kind of understand, I would think, why 7-5 makes sense for the vast majority of SEC fans. Now, how about Ole Miss? The rest of the SEC, a lot of Rebel haters out there, Lane Kiffin haters, I guess, because they think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit here. The most predicted record for them Ole Miss Rebels, 8-4. Which, again, probably when Lane Kiffin got there, you'd say, well, hell, that's not a bad record. 9-3 was the second most predicted. But how about this? 10-2, matching last season's record, the third most predicted record for Ole Miss. And again, I think this is more of a factor of roster turnover, coaching turnover, and a belief in Lane Kiffin and company to mesh all those pieces together and still have a really good year. 8, 9, 10 win season. You can't overlook that if you're an Ole Miss fan with how rugged the West is. You're getting Kentucky out of the East. That's a tricky game. That's your first non-conference, but the schedule is looking great. The non-conference should set up great to have momentum when the SEC play starts for the Rebels. So again, expectations are still high, but I think this 8-4, while I think the vast majority of Ole Miss fans not happy with that prediction, again, I think they would kind of have to understand it given all the turnover. But again, 9-3 was your second most predicted. 10-2 was your third, with 7-5 right there. So between 10 and 7 was basically every guess for Ole Miss this season. And I think that feels about right, given all the turnover and what we don't know about Ole Miss until we see them on the field this fall. Now, this was the most stunning one of all. And if Ole Miss fans are fired up over those responses, they're going to love these. Because Mississippi State tied for the most responses, 5-7 and 4-8. There was no tiebreaker though. 5-7 or 4-8 was the most predicted guesses for Mississippi State's record this fall, and that just blows me away because I don't know what the hell these people. Maybe they just don't know anything about Mississippi State. We got like 17 returning starters. We got Mike Leach. We got Zach Arnett. We got Will Rogers all returning. We got a ton of star power in the receiving corps. We got 2 great running backs returning. I know they lost Charles Cross. He was a hell of a player. Top 10 pick, I think, in the NFL draft. He's going to be probably impossible to replace. But if the players outside of that tackle position step up, Mississippi State, this is ridiculous. 5-7, 4-8. What the hell? No, this is going to be a hell of a lot better team this fall in Starkville. 8-4, 7-5, 6-6 were the next most predicted records for the Bulldogs. That's a little bit more sense, but That just blew me away. And I maybe this is just a factor of the non-conference being a little tricky. And I say tricky, but I mean, Memphis, come on. Arizona, come on. Mississippi State should wax all these teams to get some momentum heading into conference play. The Pirates, a walking upset, as Dave Bartoo likes to call them. Can't get on board with this. I'd certainly bet a hell of a lot more money on 8-4 than I would 5-7 or 4-8 there in Starkville. So I think the fans around the SEC just dead wrong when it comes to their expectations for the Mississippi State Bulldogs this season. Now, last but not least, Texas A&M. Not too surprising here, but hopes are high. I was expecting a ton of 8-4 type jokes, but that was not the winning response. But that was the second most. I think that got some projections just because people love to be jerks online. But the most common response for the Texas A&M Aggies, and I think most Aggie fans would get on board with this one, 10-2 for Jimbo Fisher's squad. Of course, you got to go to Alabama. You're hosting Miami. That's two big games. First half of that schedule. Got to play Arkansas on a neutral field. Lost to the Mississippi school, so there's a lot to turn around there for Texas A&M. But I think 10-2, given that you don't know, you know what you got in the quarterbacks. I think in most of them, but we have no idea who's the starting quarterback's going to be and how much better A&M can be with Max Johnson, Haynes King, or Connor Wigman. We just don't know how high the A&M offense can go with one of those guys. But I think A&M fans, if they're being honest, they got a lot of confidence in all these guys. And hell, that'd be a lot better, a hell of a lot better confidence than what you had last year in the game's most important position. Losing a ton of defenders, of course, but just loaded with talent all across the board on the defensive line, linebacker, and this may be your best secondary under Jimbo Fisher. So a lot to like about Texas A&M's defense and a lot to like about the offense and the pieces outside of the unknowns at quarterback and, of course, offensive line. That's a little bit of a question mark. But, again, 10-2, most popular pick for the Aggies. 8-4 was the second most. 9-3 was the third most, with the fourth and fifth were distant, fourth and fifth, but 12-0, 11-1. So, again, that speaks to expectations there. I mean, we're not seeing any. They didn't get a single 6-6, 5-7, 4-8 record, and why would you? I mean, Texas A&M's got way too much talent to fall apart under Jimbo Fisher, but I just thought that was interesting. 10-2, so the expectations very high across the SEC for them Aggies this fall. But hey, so that's going to do it for this episode of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you sticking with us here throughout the off season. I know it's not as fun without Cousin Shane, but fingers crossed, Tuesday, he's getting his internet. We'll see how much more excuses he's got after that. Hopefully even get him on camera moving forward once he's got that blazing fast internet. But I do appreciate each and every one of you. And again, I'm going to try to reach out. I've already teased Dave Bartoo, hopefully on the next episode, reaching out to some other reporters that were in Destin last week. Hope to get some interesting guests this week. But that is going to do it for this episode of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you on the next one.